Hello, everybody. Welcome to Manitoba Music's panel on international export strategies. I'm gonna just go through the line here and get all of you to introduce yourselves. Just mention your role, the company you work for, and if you could just give us a little bit of a brief history as to how you got into that. Like if you started out as a musician, if you started out by being in a fan club and postering around your city or whatever. I just think it's really cool for people to know the journey of the people who are working in music. So I'm going to start with you, Rachel.
Thank you. I'm Rachel Jackson, based in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm also director of A&R at Rock Nation label. I straddle the fence between the label and the publishing company. So I have the joys of working with not only recording artists, but writers and producers. I got my start in the music industry by way of being a promoter as a teenager. So between the ages of 16 and 17, I was popular on MySpace, I promise. And all of my friends just kind of egged me on or, pushed me to be a promoter and throw parties and, use that prowess on MySpace to actually, push culture that we had that was considered underground. We had the snap and roll movement, that Soulja Boy, that cranked that Soulja Boy situation. Yeah, so that came from my backyard, so to speak. So, that was really my entry point. And then as a professional, I worked for ASCAP. SOCAN is our Canadian partner, so you understand that is a performance rights organization that makes sure that everyone gets their money. And from there, I moved on to Rock Nation.
Cool. Thank you. Gabriela?
Hi, my name is Gabriela Urquiza. I'm based in Mexico City. I'm from Argentina originally. I started maybe 25 years old before. I'm started to work in music industry 25 years ago. It was very funny because I met some musician. A friend of mine were friend of musicians that were to performing in Buenos Aires. They work with a very huge Latin artist called Luis Miguel. So I never been I never was until that moment in a huge stadium for Latin music because I used to listen to music from US or London. So I went there and I felt, this is like very personal, but I felt like, like, how do you say? Yeah, when I start, I felt the energy and I say, oh, this is something that I want to feel more frequently. So 1 week later, the assistant of the tour manager got sick. And this guy, friend of my friend, called me to help him in the tour. And I didn't do anything. I was studying marketing and I was in the university. So I say, okay, but I have no idea how to deal with this. And say, I just need you to make sure that all the people, it were 112 people traveling on that tour. I need all the people to be on time on the lobby of the hotel at 9 because we are leaving and I need you to make this. So I did it and I remember I was calling each one by phone like, you gotta go. And I did it well my first time and the guy say, okay, come with me, I hire you. And so I left, I quit the university, I quit the job. And I was touring with them for 3.5 years. I moved to Mexico, 1993. That was a long time ago. So I started working in that way. And I have a company called Glamrock Agency. We do management, booking, development, artist development, and we have 2 divisions. One it is called Incubadora, that it's a marketing company, PR, digital strategies, and the other division is Mercado, that means market. We handle merchandising we handle licenses with bands from US and Europe every time they are touring in Latin America, meaning Paul McCartney, Metallica, and we handle merchandising, live experiences, meaning meet and greets, and we also do merchandising services for other bands.
So everything. Thank you. That's a cool story. All right, Jack.
I'm Jocko Callahan. I run Arctangent Festival, which is a 10,000 capacity math rock, post rock, noise rock festival in the southwest of England. I'm also the vice chair of the Association of Independent Festivals, and we look after between 60 and 100 independent festivals in the UK and Europe. And I also own a company called Ubiqu Live, which is music event management and consultancy. I got into the festival world by growing up in a little house in the middle of the forest, throwing parties as a kid, and I haven't grown out of it. I've just made it my career. So I joined the AAF through Arctangent, so you have to run your own festival to become a member, and through contributing to the membership meetings, I got voted onto the board of directors, and that's gone on to me being vice chair. So I'm halfway through my third year on the vice chair, as in the role as vice chair. And as a result of running the festival and having been in a band that was not very good when I was younger, I realised that actually my organisation skills were better and people were coming to me more and more for advice and consultancy. So Ubiqu Live was sort of a natural progression from that, and with the amount of public speaking as well that I was doing, it kind of made sense for me to have a business that underpinned that. So I like to be busy. I'm taking on more and more all the time, but Ubiqu Live is now it'll be 3 years old in January, so it's still sort of finding its feet and growing. But I think within 2020, we're certainly taking some more people on board to deliver some of the contracts that we have coming through.
Cool. Yes, she's full of info. We also got stuck in earlier at the other workshop. She was talking about being stuck in Halifax, and we were stuck there together, but I was like excited to just keep picking her brain. So if you have a chance while she's here, I recommend.
There's a lot of fresh air in this.
All right, Simeon, moving on to you.
All right, I'm Simeon. I run a booking agency in the Netherlands called Treetop Agency. Really how I got started, as a 19-year-old kid, me and my girlfriend at the time visited Siget Festival in Budapest, which is one of the biggest festivals in Europe. And I saw a guy from New Zealand called Thomas Oliver play his first ever European show. And really, I just fell in love with his music and I wanted to buy a CD. But it's a week-long festival with over 1 million people and people go crazy, so they don't sell CDs at merch as they're not safe to throw with. I went up to one of the stagehands anyway. I was like, hey, do you have any CDs backstage? I just want to purchase this. And his manager at the time, Kushla Aston from Aston Road, came out, who was also managing Fat Freddy's Drop from New Zealand, who you might know at the time. And we got chatting, and I told her I was a booking agent. Really, I only worked with one local band and was more of a pub crawl than actual touring. But I bluffed my way through, and I told her, well, if you ever want to do anything in the Netherlands, please give me a ring because this is just the music I live for. And a month later, she actually called. She picked up the phone and said, hey, Simeon, I know you're not a booking agent. So I shit myself. But she said, well, Thomas got booked for a festival called Celtic Connections in Glasgow, and they're covering all travel expenses from New Zealand. And I like your spirit, so I'll give you a week. Show me what you can do. We ended up doing 6 shows in 5 days, selling 5 out of 6 out. And then I started my company, and it's going to be the 5-year anniversary early next year. And I'm Thomas's European agent to date. And I represent close to 40 artists from 15 different countries now. So, yeah, I kept bluffing my way through, and now I guess I'm allowed to sit here so people take me seriously. Like,
and that's how it's done. All right, Augustin.
Hi, I'm Augustin from France. I was like 10 years ago only promoter, so I made events for people, just for entertainment, to feel free one night and forget the week who was past. After that, I started to be a booker for the artists I liked, and I started to growing my network in France, and now I'm a booker agent. I'm artist developer too. It's like management, but it's not only manager because you have to make the tour of the artist, to also it's auto production, so you have to to find money to made EP or album, and I organize Sofa Sounds show in Toulouse, and that's the best way to feel free and be poor but have fun.
That's the slogan.
This is a good punchline, Simeon.
This is going to be all week.
Great mojo.
That'll be the new hashtag for Breakout West. Be poor, have fun. Just kidding, Breakout West. We're all going to be together for a week, so this is going to get out of hand. Okay. Okay, thank you. I really love to hear how people get involved on the industry side, especially when we're talking just even to artists. I also started out as an artist, so I like people to know that although they may get to a point where they don't want to grind it out often, there's a lot of different ways that can lead to having a career in music that doesn't necessarily mean being on a stage. So thank you all for sharing. Actually, those were all really good stories and so unique. So that was great. We're just going to dive in a little deep on how a Canadian artist could enter a new market. And I know that it could be, it's probably very similar in all of your countries. But if there's anything that, any genres of music that are popular, or I know like in Germany, for example, they still really like those like physical packages and stuff. So if there's anything like that you can think of to let Canadians know, some of us, some of the people watching the video may be very interested in touring France, and some may be very interested in Mexico. I don't know if we're all going to be able to hit all of the countries as Canadians right off the bat, but I'm going to dive in kind of deep with each of you. So I guess I'll start. Well, this will be a general question for all of you first, is what does it mean for you when an artist is considered export ready? So when is it time for somebody from Canada to start looking at taking their music and focusing on another market other than their home country?
Oh, we're going
Down the line. It
line?
doesn't matter. Whoever wants to talk first.
Okay, so from an American standpoint, I'll speak from the label perspective and then just like personally, because, Atlanta, we have a strong independent scene, and that advice would be completely different from a label. So from the label perspective, you're definitely ready to explore anywhere in the US, anytime you have all of your social media streamlined, you have an aesthetic, you understand what your music looks and feels like and who your audience is. So right there, that just puts you at the front of the line. From an independent perspective, you have championed your backyard. A lot of DJs are playing your music, and you have numbers on the streaming side. So it really, depends on where in the US you want to enter, because another layer of it is understanding your sound. Because in the US, we have the East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, Southwest. You got the Dirty South, and then you have Miami, Florida, which sounds completely different than, another place across the states or whatnot. So you would need to understand what your music resonates, or how easily you can parallel your sound with a region of the US and then enter there, because that's how you gain organic adoption. And then people that aren't necessarily from that region, they'll equate it to what that region is that you pinned it to, and then adopt it and consume the music from there.
Great, that's great advice.
Okay. I think for Mexico, for example, it is important for a band to be there when the people have an awareness of the band, because there are I've been talking about this, that Mexico, it's like the Hollywood for Latin America. So there are a lot of bands trying to go there and be successful. So there is so many bands doing or trying to do the same. So the people needs to know they are very open to new artists, but they need to know about you. So I think it's time to go when you in your own. I have 2 points of view about this, because if you are in a label, in a record label, maybe they say you have to be well known in your own country. I have a different perspective of that. I think I'm actually working with an artist from Argentina that was signed by a major label, and the label say you cannot take her to Mexico because she's a singer-songwriter, and in Argentina, singer-songwriter genre is not so big. So I say, she's amazing, I want to take her to Mexico. And the label say, no, she has to be very well known here first. And I say, no. So I took it and I started the whole, development, and I've been working with her for a year. And now she's making concerts for 600 or 700 people. That it's a lot in Mexico. It's not so much, but it's a lot of people for a new artist. So I think one of the things is be hungry of a new conquest, but also you have to have numbers, talking about numbers that we don't like so much, but because every time I try to make a promo round with media, the people, the first thing that say is, okay, let me see how many views has this video. So it is like you have to develop all that part of the band.
Okay, I guess we'll just go down the line. Would you consider export ready, and when would you try to break an artist into the UK?
I think that's a question that the band need to answer for themselves. Like, you guys will know when you're ready. If you don't think you're ready, you're probably not ready. And it's also, I think, knowing the reason why you're going into those new territories. If you guys are looking to go to the Great Escape because you're going to play on the Canadian showcase, what are you hoping to achieve out of that? Is that intended to further your Canadian career, or is that intended for you to build a team in the UK? If you're going to go and play the showcases in the UK, I probably wouldn't advise you go to Great Escape, because Great Escape is basically an industry piss up for the folk that work there. So if you want to showcase to real people, go to Focus Wales, go to Liverpool Sound City, where you're more likely to have the focused attention by the booking agents, by the record labels, by local managers. Great Escape is an absolute bun fight to get people to come to your showcases. If you just want to be able to say you've played at Great Escape, then that could be a reason to go, but that's not necessarily going to help you break that territory. The UK is a hugely saturated market already. We have such a high level of competition in such a small space of land. But then the advantage you guys have got with Canadians is that, in the distance that you would travel to do a tour here, you could have gone around the UK 100,000 times, basically. Like, you've got so much ground to cover here to hit different cities, whereas in the UK, you can drive for 3 hours and you'll be in the next major city. So you could do an A cities tour and go and play all the major cities in the UK, and then you could do a B cities tour, which is all the slightly smaller cities. And if you did that whole circuit, you still wouldn't cover as much ground as you would do, perhaps even going from here to Whitehorse kind of thing. So you've got the advantage there that you're used to covering a huge amount of landmass. But I think knowing the reason why you want to break a new territory will help you decide if you're ready.
Good advice.
Yeah, I think starting off, especially in the Netherlands, know that, especially you have it here as well, you got Manitoba Music, funding systems in place are always there to support local bands. So a lot of festivals in the Netherlands, especially, they are part of a funding system where they can get up to 50% of the fee of domestic bands funded. So that means if they need to book you for €1,000, they could book a domestic band for €1,000 as well, but they get 500 back, so they can book 2 bands for that money. So know your scene, know you're ready to compete with the bands in your genre that are domestic, and be at least at that level, or ideally one step above them, from a creative standpoint. Then, that's necessary anywhere. If you want to break into it, you need to be more interesting than the people they already know. Easy. Then there's also a strategic point where, especially from a management perspective, a band having an international appeal can be really interesting for your value back home as well. I mean, you probably know it as well. If you see a completely unknown band put up a tour poster across 5 countries, you're like, holy shit, how did I not know about them? Like, what's going on here? So every now and then, especially with my domestic artists being from such a small country where it's easy to overplay real quickly, I'll send them out on support tours or like little festival gigs or DIY things in their early days across Europe, to make sure we don't overplay our own market, and also to create an international appeal from the start of. And you know you're going to lose money on that, and you need to be ready for that. I mean, puppy eyes towards your mom and dad, you know the tricks, to fund it, because that might mean that next festival summer, your fee is just up to $300 or euros or wherever you are, in your own market. So you're going to earn all that back. So like laying a grassroots fan base in all those countries while also letting that impact your visibility back home and the interest in you back home, so you can grow it simultaneously. I find those kind of strategies really interesting as well.
I like that. Interesting.
Yes, it's almost the same in France. French people like foreign bands from Canada, from America, from Germany, from everywhere. So there is place for an artist in France for a tour. As you said, you have to know that you will lose money on this, but it's about you have promotion and you have fee, and when fee is not good, promotion has to be good. So you can go in France. Canadian and France are really close, not in kilometers, but about the past, and France like it. And so, as you said too, when you go to the exports, so you have a tour outside your country, when you come back, you're more, you have more credibility for all your entourage, all your circle, professional or not. And I want to say too, you have to construct at first where you live your own fan base before doing anything else. And after, when you made tour, you can export because you have like an opportunity for that, and take it.
Okay, so I want to ask a little bit about, if you're focused on a market and if you feel like it's time to go to US or France or Mexico or wherever, what do you think is the most important in terms of team? Because, I mean, obviously, if you're going to another country, you can't really do it all on your own as much as you might want to. We were talking about this in the earlier panel. But, do you think a publicist is important? Do you think having an agent is important? Or do all the team members need to simultaneously link up and do it together? If you could just expand on that a little bit, and especially maybe in your own country, it's more important to have like a digital media strategist rather than an agent, or what are those pieces?
First and foremost, it's important for the music to be good. You cannot be the only person that's in love with your music. You can't manage yourself, you can't promote yourself, you can't be your own publicist. So you have to make sure that the music is good, and you know that based on just putting it out there and gauging a response. From there, I think the most important person is the manager. And this person doesn't have to be necessarily super qualified. They don't have to have a Juris Doctorate in managing artists. They didn't have to go to university, but they need to be someone that is like-minded with you and someone who understands your vision and then also believes in it. They have to be someone coachable, someone that is willing to learn with you, because in music, there isn't just a trajectory where you just check every list off or check every tick off of a list that's printed somewhere, and this is like, okay, this is the surefire way to get the deal that you want from a record label. So as long as the music is good, you have a good manager, that manager will be the person to navigate, okay, what can we do next? What don't we have on the team? What can I not do? And then that's where you add people on. Like, okay, I don't know how to do graphic design. We know we need a good look and feel for our Instagram aesthetics. Hire that person. Okay, so I don't really know how to speak to blogs, or I don't know how to talk to people because I'm rude. Then, okay, yes, you get a publicist. So I think, just to recap it, because I know I said a lot, the music has to be good. Your manager has to be on the same page as you if you're an artist. And then from there, you add people on based on what you cannot do, because the independent grind is definitely unique. It's something that, is irreplaceable, and it's definitely a damn good story if you make it with the cards that you're dealt. So you don't want to just spend all your money out the gate with a whole bunch of people when you really could have sat down, read a book, and learned it in between, or learned that skill that you want to apply between you and your manager.
So one thing I'll ask about that is where we live in Winnipeg, there are not many managers. So for the artists here that are struggling living in a remote area and don't have managers, what's some advice for how they might be able to do that? Or maybe even, I think there's a lot of artists here that would likely need to find a manager outside of Winnipeg because there's not enough managers for artists here. So because there is such a DIY culture, what is the best thing for an artist to do if they don't have somebody on the team?
They have to push their socials, because the internet makes the world a big blurred line when it comes down to all types of products. It doesn't matter if you're selling makeup or if you're selling music. So if you're doing what you're supposed to do online, you're networking, you're again championing your backyard and your hometown, managers will come to you, because they're the ones, or the ones that you're speaking of that are hard to find in Winnipeg. They're the ones that are always looking and going to different showcases, and they're trying to figure out who's next. So because they have all the connections, and they want to make sure that they're the champion in their friend circle. If they want to be the A&R that's flying all over the place, speaking in towns that are often overlooked, and they want to put someone on their back and say, hey, this is who I found in this nook and cranny. How can we make it work? And then so on and so on.
I like that. That's actually, one thing that I have noticed is when an artist gets attention from one industry person, all of a sudden all the industry people are like, no, I want them.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Because we watch each other.
Just to say, I work with quite a bit of DIY artists who are self-managed, or at least were self-managed when I signed them on. And what I feel like, yes, it is really important that there's multiple people saying you're good out, except yourself and your mother, because that just shows you've got a foundation going, and also the wider the team, the more specialized your people are. But then also what I see is because of that whole image and knowing that it's better to have someone telling people you're good other than yourself, is that people often try to sign management really early, and if there's no manager in their area, they're ask their neighbor who's a good friend, and maybe that's not the best relationship because it's too personal, and you want someone to be able to reflect on your ideas and be professional about that. So I think if you're DIY, make sure that you evaluate often, just like you would do if you had a team. Like set meetings and say, okay, this time we're not making music. We're gonna look at our plans and reflect what are we doing well, and what is it that we need some extra help on, and be honest about that. And if you sign with a manager, only do so if you know exactly what you want from that manager, what are the things you need extra help on, and the things you can do yourself. And sometimes that's not even a manager, because sometimes you got your shit together and it's only the little things. So the team might not be just one spider in the web, but you could be the spider in the web, adding people to the team, specialized in the things you're not so good at. And all of that you should, I think, do in a way that allows you to focus on your art as much as possible, so you can keep growing as a musician instead of being busy with other things you don't want to do. But yeah, that's the one piece of advice. Before you sign with somebody, know what you want from them and find the person being able to deliver that.
I think as well, if you have a manager on board, you should consider them as an additional member of the band in terms of their weight and what they're doing for you. I think even before you worry too much about the bigger team, there are too many bands out there that don't even align with their other band members. So you guys need to make sure that you're all on the same page first before you even think about a bigger team. Once you do start thinking about a bigger team, I think a manager is good. I agree with Simeon that you kind of want a bit of a departure from that. They don't need to be so close to the music, but they still have to have that like deep-rooted love for what you're doing. But then I think before a team, especially if you're DIY, you need to look at your network. So who do you know, or who can you know through the people that you're already in touch with? Because often those leads are going to be worth way more than spending a huge amount of money on PR or, you know, socials or something that you can already do yourself. So looking within your own network can sometimes build you that team without you having to commit to a team. And then once you've been in those territories and you've met those people and you have an understanding about how that territory works a bit more, that's when you should start to piece your team together.
So I'll just, so we kind of got on the manager thing there. But in terms of touring, like I'll go to you now, Gabriela. But for an artist to break into Mexico, if they're coming from Canada, how would they start? What would be your advice for a Canadian who's like, I want to go to Mexico now to perform?
The first thing that I think a Canadian or an artist should do is make a digital marketing campaign at small, no matter how big it is, you know.
Like a highlight reel with with information.
Yeah, with information of the band. And you know, there are a lot of I would like to share the information because I have it here. That in Mexico, Facebook is still having more than 60% of the market. So the people there is looking all the time for new things because basically Mexican is really open to new music. So if you make like a small marketing campaign in Facebook or in Instagram that can help increasing numbers for followers or likes. Mm-hmm. So that was, I work with the tourist company that is a company from here, that is a band from here, and we started making this awareness campaign for the Mexican market. Then they just been there for shows, and the shows were for 150 people. So the first time they were there last year for a music market, but this was the first time they were there by themselves. So I think that it's a good thing. And another thing is, once you got that and you increase your numbers in views for the videos, you can try to find the PR that can help to make some interviews or set phoners. And then I think you have to have maybe a 6 months or 8 months work before you go there. That is my advice.
The band, the Broken Islands, that I spoke about in the last panel as well, they have gone out there a couple of times just to scout the territory before they've even booked a show. So they've gone out there. I think just a pair of them went out there just to go and meet people in London, to go and suss out a few cities to work out where was worth touring, because it's a lot cheaper to send 2 people without any kit to figure out where's worth touring and what venues are worth going to, than send a whole band out there with all the expenses that you have to do it. So although it could be a loss leading trip for you, it could actually save you a lot of money in the long run and also give you an awful lot of insight that you wouldn't have had without actually stepping foot in that territory.
That's a good idea. That's what I often will say about even showcasing festivals. If you haven't showcased yet, go to the showcasing festival as an individual, make those contacts, because it's often like a summer camp and the same people come back and over. So it is really important to get out there. And I think it proves a little bit to the industry people that you're talking to that you're willing to invest in your career by making that move, because whoever is taking you on is also investing in you and putting their faith in you. So good advice. And we'll skip, because you have the microphone. No.
There is no.
What about France? Who should be
Yeah.
the first one?
It's the same that in your own country you have to connect with people and to connect with people who have the same vision as you as a musician. He understand you and he will defend your project in his country as you defend in your country. So for that, it's quite easier if you have contacts in the country you want to go. After that, everybody say.
Yeah, there's one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, and especially like, okay, in an ideal scenario, as a booking agent, I sign on a band that has a fan base there's demand for them. But in a lot of cases, it's just not like that, and I might still sign you if I really like your music. But when it comes, especially from bands outside of Europe willing to tour Europe, like everybody wants to go to Amsterdam and ideally have 2-3 days off and smoke weed and have fun. And I'd say, like, on a first trip, knowing that there's no demand for your music, skip the important media towns. And that might sound really weird, but those are the cities where most things are happening at the same time. So if you skip, like, you skip London, you skip Paris, you skip Amsterdam, you skip Berlin on your first 2 tours, but you do the towns close to there where not that many international artists come through. So just the fact that you're from Canada is an exotic factor that brings like 20 or 30 people extra to the show. You lay a grassroots foundation in those towns. Then when you've built up a bit of a live reputation and you come back and you only hit the media towns, you keep it really exclusive, people have a connection with your music already and they'll be willing to travel from outside the city to come see you. And that makes like Facebook event numbers go up, and then people in the cities are going to notice that, which makes it more interesting. And that's like when you can really start getting into the industries and the venues you want to be at. But if there's no demand for your music, don't go to the places where you have most competition.
That's a really great point.
On a similar sort of vein to that, one of the biggest success stories I've seen for exporting music is a band called Space Blood from Chicago, who musically is very, very obscure. Their stage performance is very, very odd, but it has a huge amount of talkability about it. And the way they've got into the UK and become quite well known within the UK is by befriending a band that did a similar sort of music to them. And they just struck up a social media conversation. That conversation went back and forward, and one of the guys was over for Great Escape just to attend it, and then went to meet the person that they'd been talking to on social media and just built up a really nice relationship. So then when they wanted to come and tour the UK, it was an obvious choice to go and tour with that band, and that band in the UK already had a following. They were then shouting about this band Space Blood. So Space Blood's name started to get known to people coming to the headliner band's show, but they also had some idea about who the support band was, and knowing that they were from overseas, there was that level of exoticism about them. So people had a real intrigue. And the Space Blood have gone on to do very, very well within the UK. Having said that, now gone their own ways, but they've played at Arctangent 2 or 3 times to really packed out tents, which if they'd have tried to do that on their own without having branched out and built that relationship, I don't think they would have had the success that they did have within the UK, especially in such a weird niche genre and being such an obscure band. I think that's great, but you know, that initial sort of lateral way of thinking to build their team was another band. It wasn't, you know, a record label or a PR company. It was people doing the same thing as them.
That actually made me think of another question. With you running a festival, if there's an act from outside of the UK who's applying, what would make you be interested, or what would make you go, okay, I'm going to take a shot on this band?
Firstly, because we book such weird music, you'd have to fit in that genre, which we don't really have a genre, but you have to be doing something that's aligned with the sort of music that we would book. You probably would have to play the UK a few times before, or at least be playing such big shows in your home territories or local territories that you have a big following within the UK. So therefore it would be kind of like an exclusive show. To echo the earlier panel, we'd want to see a live video. It sounds really simple, but follow the application process to the letter. I don't want a big wafty long email. I want a link to one song. Don't attach it to your email. Give me your name, give me your social media, tell me what sort of fee you're looking at so we know where we can place you. And that means you're more likely to get booked. Also, if you want to be playing at a festival, most applications for the UK festivals will open now for next summer. And if you've applied once and you haven't heard back, don't keep applying. Because what normally happens is that if you're applying online, certainly for us, you get filtered into a spreadsheet that we will then go through and listen to absolutely everything. Where possible, if we think we're going to book you, or we'll try and see you live. We also then have 2 or 3 other spreadsheets where we will take on board recommendations from trusted sources. And if there's a correlation between all 3 of our kind of key indicators as to whether or not you're right for the festival, then chances are you'll hear from us. So again, it comes down to your network. You can submit yourself, but who else do you know in the UK, bands-wise or trusted press, that will recommend you to us? That means that you will end up on our spreadsheet 3 times across the board, that we need to then take note of you if we don't already know who you are.
Yeah, the whole back end system and on getting any opportunity, a lot of people don't understand the the marks. But I would say that in general, when it does come to opportunities, there are other tastemakers, I guess, that are involved in making those decisions.
And I'm aware it seems really unpersonal having, you know, basically a Google form for you to fill out or whatever the equivalent is. But actually that's purely there to stop you getting those long wafty emails with the, you know, 3-page introduction before we get to the bit that we actually need. It actually
The kind of emails I send out.
Yeah. It kind of facilitates us listening to your music a lot quicker. So although it seems like we're trying to keep you at arm's length, actually there's a very good administration reason for that. So if you can also then do that, you know, unfortunately there isn't one application system for every festival in the UK. You will have to go through that and do this manually yourself. So it is labour intensive, but do it, it's worthwhile. And then make sure that those tastemakers, as you mentioned, are also putting your name forward. And that's not going to be a form, that's just through word of mouth or a call campaign, or, you know, asking somebody that you know in the UK, can you speak to that booker at that festival because we really want to play it because we think it's right for us. That's how you'll get on the bill.
Simeon, you had talked a bit at dinner last night about how sometimes like you'll take on a band that is, you know, not necessarily going to be a moneymaker right off the hop, but you believe in their music and you'll take a chance on them and maybe take a loss for a little bit until you can build them up to the place where they're actually going to be making some serious revenue. So when it comes down to that, what is it that you look for? What is it that you see in an act where you're like, okay, they've never played here before, or like maybe they're not quite ready, but they're so good, then I'm gonna do this?
Yeah, it's a bunch of things. I mean, for the people not knowing like what my company is like, I work anything from old school reggae to a lot of punk stuff to indie pop to Portuguese jazz now, like psychedelic post-punk from Poland. I do all kinds of weird things. I really do whatever I like, but I think all across my roster, the one thing my artists have in common is a sense of urgency about their music and their art, like the knowledge that for me that they would keep playing even if no one listened, which makes me believe that if we're patient enough, they'll keep on going. They do what they do, and they'll be ready to grab the opportunities I might be able to offer them. And like one great example I find, who were really patient with me as well, is a band called Bear Jams from the UK, who were actually the 3rd band I ever signed on because one of my favorite bands took them on for some shows in the UK, super small shows, and they shared a SoundCloud link to their first demo. And I heard that, and it was a terrible production, but I thought, oh, this vocalist is great. Oh, wait, and that percussion is rhythmically, that's on, yeah. And I just kept my eyes on them for like a year. And then I know that they booked their own show in Amsterdam in some bar. And the only reason for that, they had like a reggae dub crossover band. And the only reason they booked that show was because it was the bass player's birthday and they wanted to party in Amsterdam and they wanted an excuse to go. So I met up with them then and really liked the show. I happened to be a promoter at a festival that weekend and we had someone drop out. So I was like, oh, you want to do another date? Let's give it a try. And the audience loved it. And then we started working and we took 4 years. And now like we kept developing a live show, but mainly in the Netherlands, even though they're from the UK. And now after 4 years, they are dropping the debut album next year, So we like kept the music back as well because we wanted to introduce them live first, so that we know that when the album drops, people are actually ready to listen to it. So now, by building such a live reputation in the Netherlands, I found all these international partners on board. We actually got them onto Glastonbury this year. We ended up doing 45 festivals across 8 countries this year. So we introduced them live everywhere before dropping the album and then taking the next steps. But in those kind of cases, it's very important for me to know that the artist is working really hard on developing themselves. And yes, sometimes we did some shows that were quite bad, but we do them for mileage. And also, like, not every experience should be luxurious, because especially now we're breaking into Eastern Europe, like the foundations are different, the hospitality is different, and I want them to be ready to tour anywhere before we go full force. And if an artist just shows in their personality, their drive, sorry, and the way they think about their music, that they're willing to do that, then we can go on and make a long-term strategy and like give it the full 100%, and no, it's going to be a fun ride whether we succeed or not. Like, and yeah.
Great, thank you. So that actually brings me to my next question a little bit, is I just want to know what the touring and music climate is like in each place. I'm going to pose it a little bit different to you because we know a lot more about America than we do about anything else. But for example, in Canada, most of our cities, most bands have to do between a 5 and 14-hour drive to get to the next major music market. Often you get there and the local bands that you got on the bill don't bring anybody, and you're playing to the other bands, the bar staff, and their aunts and uncles. There's not a ton of hospitality. Most things are door deals here. Sometimes there are some venues that will contribute to touring bands, but it's usually between 150 and 200 when you're first starting out and you don't have a draw. So that's what it's like for Canadians. And in the winter, it's even worse because sometimes the highways shut down completely. So for Canadians to carry out a tour, it costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of time because, you know, it's also, you're taking all this time off work to go across a massive country. And we don't really have a large population, so it does make touring very hard, and that's why we have grants and a funding system to help Canadians to get out to other markets. So that's why for us it's really, really important to break other markets, because it is just so hard here to actually have a sustainable touring career. So that's what Canada's like. Now I want to know what each of your countries are like, if there is generally hospitality included, if you have people that are even interested in local music, just as music lovers, because I think probably most people here can attest to the fact that Canadians are more likely to go drop $50 at the movie theater than they are to pay $10 to get into a show. So I would like to know kind of what the culture is like surrounding your countries. For you, I would like to know if you're able to sort of break down those different regions and talk about the different genres, because we know about the cities and
honestly, it's not that the genre per region is different. It's just the way the music sounds. So you might have country and it'll sound different in Nashville than it will on the West Coast, just because they're inspired by different things. They have a lot of different motivators when it comes down to writing music. In the South, you'll have trap music that sounds one way, but then it may sound different if a New York rapper raps it. So it's more so just, you know, our regional, the way that we all speak differently. Like, yes, we are Americans united by the states, but just in every region, everyone speaks differently. There are different, you know, nuances on how to move, how to push your music. So, you know, just based on the neighborhoods that people come out of, you know, they sound different. But what I will say is that when it comes down to touring in America, independents are getting very clever. Instead of booking your traditional tour that you're saying, you know, it's hard to logistically set up with little to no, you know, ticket sales or hospitality, artists and managers are either curating their own small shows in every city and calling it a tour, or doing a link up with different curators that already have their own shows going on. Their artists may be first, second, or third, not even the headlining artist on the bill, and they're calling that show a part of the tour, or a combination of both. So the manager may have a strong backing in the South or in the Southern states, but then over on the West Coast, they don't, and they paid a couple promoters a couple $100s to get on a couple of shows in the Bay Area or in the Pacific Coast area. So then you have 8 shows that are back to back, or that are within a 3 months time, that span different cities, and you call it a tour. And it looks good to a label because it looks like you're moving around. We know you're independent, you're not signed, or if you do have an investor, we know that someone else believes you other than a big machine. So it actually draws more visibility. So it's a tactic that, it's definitely tried and true. It's something that a lot more, independents are doing, and it's something that labels are definitely taking notice of.
Interesting. And what do you have like any? Because I am interested in the different regions and how like country sounds different here than here. Do you like? Is there like a place we can go find that out?
What do you mean?
Like, is there like a website that like talks about like the different like vibes of every region, or do you just have to like live there to know?
I'm sure it's Googleable, but as the resident Atlanta native, I will say, Atlanta hip hop, I'll just focus on that particular genre because that's my background. Atlanta hip hop and R&B, has it comes from a particular not only struggle, but just a different backyard. So we're influenced by what we go through, what we see, the food we eat, the clubs we go to, and they're different everywhere you go. So you may go to Chicago and it's it's cold all the time, and then in their neighborhood their struggle is one thing, but then again you go to LA, their struggle is another thing, or their triumphs look differently. So it just all it blends, but at the same time it's something that's separately respected and equal, but it sounds different.
So our hip hop should revolve around -40 and poutine. That should be our vibes.
I mean, all music is driven by vibe, but a sound is coined by, I'll say, lingo. Atlanta, we have a lot of different things. Like we say shouty, we say, where they do that at. We say what when we don't understand things. So, from our slang, comes a culture. And in the Bay Area, on the West Coast, they get hyphy, they go dumb, they have different languages that they speak that are still English, but that drives the culture in that area. So I would say, along with its influences, how you say, you know what I mean, or hey, here or in Canada, that definitely can be a driver to build a musical wave for sure.
But may I ask one thing about that? Like when it comes to those areas and all those people having their specific customs, and do you feel like the audience usually likes artists who cover that like same energy? Or do you think artists that are way different from that and therefore really exotic to the region might do well as well? Because I feel like sometimes artists who are going to a country, they try to change their performance a bit to fit the culture they're going into. But every now and then I feel like no, the difference is what it makes it interesting for the people here, because they want to see something they don't see every day.
Yeah.
What you
Simeon,
reckon?
You honestly answered your own question, because yes,
Okay.
different music or music that is exported from a different country definitely sounds exotic to Atlanta, and we invite it because we call ourselves the United Counties of Atlanta sometimes, just because we have so many different exotic countries that have areas within 285, which is like a big highway that like goes around in a circle, that are in Atlanta and that do showcase and that are, or that do identify as bands rather than just artists that belong to a hip hop genre. So we definitely love our own, back home feel, but we definitely are a place that invites a lot of different sounds, and we celebrate it actively.
We're all gonna go home now and Google like different sounds of the United States.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, it's cool. It's just cool to learn about that, because I mean the U.S. is our neighbor, so that's naturally where we learn a lot about that, and often we tour that, and it's very similar to how things work here, except the cities are closer together and it's less cold. Okay, I'm gonna move on to Gabriela. Can you just tell us a little bit about what touring is like in Mexico, how far the cities are, how people are treated?
Okay, Mexico have something that it's called Malinchista. That means became from the conquest of Mexico, but still it's something that people talk about. It is like people, it's more open to things from abroad than their own music. So their own things, anything, talking about everything. So the people, it's very, very well open to new discovers or to new bands. Thankfully, you can make a show, a sold out show for 75,000 people in Mexico City, and you can make a show 50 or 70 kilometers away for the same amount of people, or maybe for 25,000 people. So you have huge cities very near one of each other. So you can rent a van and you can tour around Mexico City and all the area, and it can take maybe 2 weeks doing shows, performing shows every day. Good days are from Wednesday or Tuesday to Saturday. Sunday and Monday are not so good for shows, for small shows. So and it is cheap, because maybe with, what, a bus ticket can cost $5 or $3 to go through the different cities, or you can rent a van for $100 per, maybe for 3 days, 4 days. So it is cheap to tour. The people, it's very open. Mainly the arrangements are for the door, So, or maybe you can try. I have a circuit made with different bars that they are given hotels and transportation and backline. So if you have more, it is like if you have more tickets than the cost that they have, they give you the full money. So we used to work a lot with these marketing digital strategies before, and then take the bands for touring around for 15 days, and we can make maybe 6, 7, 8 shows.
And what was I gonna? Oh, it slipped my mind already. I had a whole question. And so you were just saying that. So there's Mexico City, and then there's lots of other
You have
towns
Mexico
around
City,
there. Okay, and then so you could basically do 2 weeks in that area.
Yeah, and it's called Bajío,
Okay.
and you can maybe make 4 shows, 70 kilometers. You have a lot of cities: Querétaro, León, Guanajuato, Guadalajara. That it's something that you don't need to take an airplane, so you can do it driving. And
You don't have to drive for 8 to 14 hours.
No,
yeah.
maybe 2, 3 hours. I think maximum 6.
Oh, I remember what my question was now. How easy is it for an artist from another country to get merch across the border? Have you encountered that at all, where someone has tried to come and they can't bring all of their merchandise?
No, you can take it.
Okay,
And actually,
it's not-
Mexico is a place where there are a lot of merchandising selling. There is we have a merchandising division, and you can take your own CDs and take the T-shirts, and you can barely, get a lot of money with that. The people loves to buy merchandise, actually.
Nice. Okay. Cool. Well, sounds like a new market we might have to visit.
Yeah, because
Cheap to tour, buys merch.
No, and I was reading to her that it sounds very interesting for me. I just knew this, that the 31% of the total population is between 12 and 29 years old. Wow. So, and 50% of these people listening to music and goes to concerts.
Wow. So they really do like music there very much. And in the same way that Simeon was saying, maybe try going to the other cities. Would you also recommend that with Mexico City being like the Hollywood of music? Would it be better to tour the smaller markets?
There is only one thing that the band needs to take care about in Mexico, that it's Mexico is not so secure now, so you have to always have someone local,
Okay.
you know. What's
Well, instead of just, that's good to know, but instead of focusing on Mexico City, because that's where we all think, that's where we want to play a show, there's a lot of competition with other music there. Is it better to go to a smaller city to play? No,
I
okay.
think it's good to go directly to Mexico City.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was very interesting. All right, Jacques, do you want to explain a little bit about the UK climate for touring?
Yeah, we're not very hospitable. You might not get paid a lot of money because most of the promoters in the UK are DIY and they don't have that money. They're taking as much of a risk on booking an international band or even a local band as you are by playing it. So initially your fees will be very low if you get paid anything at all. We're not very good at putting people up because we don't have the money to do so. We have a very severe lack of funding for music in the UK, especially when it comes to export talent coming in. You know, we can't even give money to our own artists. So basically being in the band in the UK is a very, very expensive hobby until you have been doing it for a very long time and are very, very skint. I would avoid London on your first come into the UK because London is absolutely saturated and people are lazy and they won't want to come out. If you do play a London show, you're better off playing a free show just because you're more likely to get walk-ins. And if you're looking to attract music industry to come and see you, you're probably better off on a Wednesday or a Thursday night than you would be any other night of the week. Muse famously sing that they have played in every toilet, and we genuinely do have what's called the toilet circuit in the UK, which is a series of old public toilets that have been turned into music venues that are actually probably some of the most successful venues that we have in the UK, and they are all in your B towns, so your smaller towns like Tunbridge Wells, which is halfway between London and Brighton. It's 200 cap, but you know you can play a really good show in there, and the guys who started it with £3,500, and it's been running for 25 years. So there's some really cool venues. I'm going to bang the same drum again. It's about your network. If you can tie in with DIY promoters, which exporting talent, unless you're signed to a major, you're not likely to get onto a major show. So finding those DIY promoters or the small venues is going to be your best way to tour the UK, unless you can go on tour with a band that's already established there. You should expect to tour cyclically, so you'd go around and perhaps be the opening band in some of the very small venues, and then you'd play pretty much the same circuit again, or a similar circuit with similar sized venues, perhaps as a second band on the bill out of 4, and then eventually you build up so that you become the headline band on that tour, still playing the smaller venues, and then look to your A cities. Again, you don't want to be saturated there. You kind of want to have that desirability that you don't play so many shows that people see you playing there all the time. You need that bit of desire that you're not here that often, we must go and see you, and that's where your talkability comes in. You know, if you went over and you played a really good showcase at Focus Wales or Liverpool Sound City and then came back on a tour, you want all of the people there that saw you to come again, and those that didn't see you, you want them talking about you, so they have to go and see you. The benefit you've got, as I mentioned I think in the last panel, was that the UK is small. You know, even if you had a show in Glasgow and a show in Brighton, that's an 8-hour drive. That's less than what you normally do here. So even if you're bouncing all over the country and your routing seems a little bit all out of sorts, it's probably not going to be an issue if you're used to touring in Canada. Obviously, a good booker will book you shows that are on a good run. And also then the benefit of that is if somebody is between two cities, say Bristol and Newport, for example, they could then, if they can't make one night, they could potentially make the other.
Thank you for that. All right, Simeon, Netherlands.
We're the exact opposite from the UK. No, like accommodation is an issue often, but you get fed, you get the drinks you want. It's really good, and the reason for that is that we've got a different promoter system in the Netherlands. So there's not city promoters who hire a venue and then to promote the show and put you up, but all the venues and festivals have in-house promoters on a salary. Which means that, for example, if you look at a venue like Paradiso in Amsterdam, they have a 1,500 cap room, a 250 cap room. Then they have another location around town, which is 500 cap. And they also work with some like churches and like special things around the city, if that's applicable. But in the venue, they have their horrible dance nights in the main hall on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. And the only reason they do those is because they generate a lot of money, which they are then able to invest in talent they believe in for the creative spectrum they want to show the people. So you can get a pretty decent fee, but on a first round, like even if you pull like 30 people, if the promoter sees you're putting in the work, you might be invited back. If you're just booked, you take the money and you go. Like if they don't mind losing money on a show if the show's good and you did everything you could to make it as good as possible. But it's a pretty easy foundation. Like on a first time tour for a Canadian band doing venue shows, you get at least like €300 minimum plus like catering and everything at every show. So that's a pretty good starting point. Then the thing is that we're a tiny patch of land. Like the longest drive you could possibly have all the way down south to the top is 4 hours or so. But we have a culture where people are used to traveling for shows. And that's why I said it's probably good to avoid some of the major cities the first time, because if you convince them in their hometown, they'll be willing to travel for you next time. And because it's so small, it's super easy to overplay. So don't try and do everything at once, but spread it out. Yeah, that's mainly it. Then one thing I think is really important when trying to break into a country, because it's a super condensed and active music market, is you need to make some concessions. Like you see artists who do really well in their home country, they often are financially dependent on their festival season. Which means, like for me working with some Canadian bands, very often I don't get a chance to have them over during festival season because that's where they need to earn their living back home. Which means I can never widely introduce them to a broader audience where they're not responsible for having the people come in and selling the tickets. So if you really, really want to build in a market and want to invest in it, that also means you need to make some sacrifices back home and say, okay, we're gonna see if we can like find some accommodation partner or a cheap place to rent, and we're just gonna be out there for a month, but during the festival season, and gonna widely introduce ourselves that way, which I think for back home sometimes is a good story as well. I sent with one of my Dutch artists that I manage, from this December onwards to next July, I'm sending the frontman to Philadelphia, which is like where the grassroots of his scene is, and we're working with a local management team to find a local band. And the fact that he's not available and that festivals in May and June simply can't have them makes them want them more next year. So that's also thinking long term. But yeah, that's one thing I've noted with bands who do well in their home country. They often aren't willing to do that. And if you're not willing to do that, you're going to have a really, really tough time. But if you are willing to put in that energy, yeah, you can go a long way.
Actually, I forgot to ask Jack these questions too, so I'm going to ask both of you at the same time. One is, I do want to ask about merch. How often do you think Canadian artists should go back to that market to develop it?
The merch question first. So it might be easier just for you guys to print merch in the UK. There's loads of companies in the UK that will print merch, and again, it comes down to your network. There must be somebody you know in the UK that you could have that merch delivered to, so it would save you another bag in the hold that you have to pay for. Unit costs are so low in the UK because we print so much merch, it's ridiculous. And also it's probably one of the biggest ways to fund your tour. At my festival, for example, bands will make more money off of merch sales at the festival than they will make the rest of the year. So, there really is a good opportunity to make some serious money just off your merchandise. So again, local know-how, so knowing what will sell in the UK. At the moment, battle jackets are a big thing. So if you have a patch made, the unit costs on those are really, really low. The sales costs of them are relatively high. It's not a huge thing for you to try and fit into the van. And people might be a little bit more throwaway with their money to buy that. And then they're walking around advertising your band on their jackets. So thinking about your merch in a clever way is a really good way to not only get some money, but also to keep your name in that territory, especially in the UK. I've forgotten what the second question was.
The second question is how often should, if a Canadian artist starts touring the UK, how often should they, I'd be interested in hearing Gabriela's too. I forgot this question altogether, but how often should they be returning to this market?
I think in the UK, the market will almost dictate how quickly you can come back. So I'm trying to book shows now for March next year for one of my roster artists, and there's just not the venues available. So again, it comes back to the sort of strategy we were talking about in the last panel, that if you want to be touring in the UK every 6 months, you need to be booking at least 8-9 months in advance for each of those tours, just to secure the venues that you want, or to play with the sorts of acts that you want, or work with the promoters that you want, because the good promoters will book up very, very quickly. So you there's nothing to stop you touring every month if you wanted to. But I think if you're going to do that, you'd want different routines to play at different venues to try and build up that fan base differently. So it's all about your strategy and what your main aims are. But yeah, it will come down to how organised you are as to how quickly you can repeat that tour.
And sorry, before we go back, I'm interrupting the flow, but Gabriela, how often should an artist keep coming back to Mexico if they want to make an impact?
I think they might go there twice a year, and try to avoid festivals season, because there are not so many slots for new bands, sincerely, and they need to know that the band have their own audience before take it to these huge festivals. So my suggestion is to go between end of January and February, and then go there in September, because October is the worst month to tour there. It is called Rocktober, because everybody's going and there are a lot of shows happening.
I would love to go there in January, February, so that's great. Good to know. Okay, sorry, back to you now, Simeon. Same questions.
Yeah, when it comes to merchandise, we're like, what good to know is, like, once you're in Europe, in the European Union, which you're still part of now, but like there's different import and export rules per country. But once you're in, there's like free travel and trade across all the territories. So if you're going on a European tour, research the countries you're going to, see whatever country it's easiest to get your things in. Because, for example, Germany is horrible. Netherlands is quite easy. Mm-hmm. So make sure your stuff gets sent to the Netherlands and pick it up there, and then you're free to go around. So be smart about that. And then also, we even, as the Netherlands, because we're such a tiny country, we need to do a lot of exporting ourselves. We have a tax treaty with most of the relevant music markets around the world, basically saying that we can pay you without charging any VAT or withholding tax on shows and merchandise. And in the treaty, like, the other country will do the same thing for Dutch artists, which makes the Netherlands a really interesting place from a tax perspective as well. Then when it comes to frequency, it's all about also planning the promotion for it. Because as I mentioned, if you, I'd say never come by the club scene more than twice a year, unless you're selling out and you know people are going to buy tickets anyway. But and then the festival season is a completely different story. But if you're doing like the circuit where you do the small towns first, and then you want to try and get people from those small towns to your bigger city shows in the next round, it's not smart to have the next tour with the small towns again announced already, because if they know you're going to be back there in 3 or 4 months, they won't travel for your shows. So especially in that planning, think about promotionally, like, hey, what do you need your audience to do to make these shows successful, and plan that accordingly. Because if they know they won't have to travel in a few months, they simply won't, because we're lazy human beings. But generally, yeah, I'd say club scene between once every 18 months and twice a year, depending on how much demand there is for your music, and festival season. Basically same thing. you can do a load of festivals on the first time, then try and get like one bigger festival on the next run to make it a bit more exclusive, and just switch it around a little bit to keep people's interest peaked.
Awesome. All right. Last but not least, Augustin.
I think I remember the question.
I can repeat. I don't even know if anyone who's watching this video
About
is probably like,
hospitality, right?
where are we? Yeah, I mean, what is it? How easy is it to drive around France? How are people treated? Do people like going to shows? Yeah.
In France, we have the most, how can I say, the most road for a little territory. So you can pass to city quickly enough. We have lots of type of venues. We have like one type. The first one is called coffee concerts. So it's like a pub, and you are with your band, and you just make a concert. The budget is not really big because it's for almost all the time the bartender who just like music and want to bring bands and music in his venue. So we have hospitality. We have we give a flat, a meal for a night, and a little bit of cash. It depends of if it's control for taxes or if it's just like this hand to hand in cash. You have another kind of venue called SMAC. It's a musical scene, and the country give money to this kind of venue to diffuse artists. So even if they know that they will not earn money, and they will not bring lots of people in there, it's why they are help for the country. You can go there too, but all the time you have the flat and you have a meal at night. For a group who's not really known, you can go city to city. You can have a concert to 1 hour on the road. For example, to the south of France, to the north of France, it's around between 9 and 10 hours. So you can make in almost all states. It's called departments. You have like one big venue. Well, it's more difficult to go there because there are lots of person who wants to go there, but you have all the venues called coffee concerts, where you can go easily, and it's like DIY. All the person loves music, so the contact is easier with the people. If you already went there, if you're already been there, you and you had a good contact, next year you can go easily too. So you can go once, made a tour of 4 or 5 dates, and the year after you can go and have these 5 dates and 5 more if you want. You have not to focus on your work ever done, but you can work to make another tour more bigger. That's and it's in France too. We have something called intermittence. It's like a job. It's a statue in France who the country help you. So you have to do 507 hours in 1 year, and you will be helped the year after. If you can't have any good cash. No, it's good pay, good fees. Yeah, good fees. So it helps a lot. It helps to have comfortable finance for you, for your health, but it brings you in like circle of life, or you have to make dates only for have your hours at the end of the year and do it again and do it again. So it's
So if
it's
you
cool.
if you accumulate a certain amount of hours,
Yeah.
then they'll help you with more shows, or
Yeah, it's they help you for your life.
oh, okay.
It's French organization for helps people who want to live for music.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's like,
Is that
I've worked with the system once with one act. It's like if you invest a certain a minimum amount of hours, they perceive you as a professional musician. Therefore, there is a minimum salary requirement, so
Right.
they'll help you to at least make the bottom end that you need to basically stay alive.
I guess
almost.
similar to a union would if you were part of a union. Well, we have a musicians union here, and it's
Yeah.
supposed to protect people the same way, but you pay into that. Okay. All right, now I understand. Okay, sorry, go on. I just
sorry,
wanted
I'm
to
not-
make sure I was understanding correctly. And does that work? Like, if you were a Canadian and you wanted to be regularly touring France, would you be able to qualify?
If you stay in France,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Wow,
Yeah, you
interesting.
can do that if you stay
Okay.
here. Yeah. It's all about just where you're living, but
Mm-hmm.
you can. Yeah.
Interesting.
I would
okay.
like to ask something. Do you need a working permit or a visa to tour in France when you are going for promotion, or in Netherlands or in London? Do you need any type of visa to tour?
No, touristic.
Touristic? Okay.
Depends on how much money you make.
Okay.
And in the UK, you do need one for Canadian artists to tour. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. I've got all the terminology written down from Passport Summit, which I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
let people
like in the
know.
UK, you have a thing called a Tier 5 visa, which basically, like, the bigger music organizations are able to sponsor you, which basically is a free visa for a limited period of time.
I believe it's 6 months.
Yeah, and it's like if one of the bigger organizations, and like some London promoters have that, some booking agencies have it, some labels. So find someone who's willing to say, okay, we're sponsoring, which basically is them saying this artist is important for our like entire musical culture, and therefore we need to invite them over here, which is the free form of a visa. If you don't find anyone, it's going to get expensive.
I think you can tour up to 3 months without that as well, if you're not making more than a certain amount of money.
Yeah,
don't think
I
that
mean, I've had
counts.
artists stopped at the
Seriously?
at the border, like, or it was like they didn't have that, so they couldn't bring instruments in.
Yeah,
And it's
it's
like,
not yet.
yeah, there's always tricks. There's always a gray area. But
It's
finding a
different for
sponsor
every
for a tier
country.
5 is the easiest way.
Yeah, because a sponsorship can just be a letter, can't it? It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, it's just a
financial.
signed letter, and you get a stamp saying this organization is saying
So it
they're
could be
allowed to
just.
come in.
I think it can even be just like an email confirmation that you've got a festival slot, or a handful of DIY shows or whatever is enough just to prove that is you being invited into the UK to do that.
Although you should check if they're on the list of official sponsors, because I've had that with an artist from New Zealand.
If
who stopped
anyone
even
watching
though
this
the letter-
video or in this room is going to tour any other country, you come see us at Manitoba Music because we have all this information for you. So I'm going to just move on. We're going to wrap up very quickly here, but I do want to ask you just about bringing merchandise into France. Do you know if that is ever a problem?
No, you can bring merchandising
Okay.
in France. I think in each country, musician needs merchandising to earn more money, because when it's like when I said for coffee concerts, it's not a bigger fee So merch is always good, even for a good reputed artists who make in France. We call that between 5,000 and 10,000 capacity. They made around 25,000 euros of merchandising. So it's really important. Merchandising, even if it's like a badge or stickers of, it's promotion too, it's communication, and it's good to have one, because you have, what is it? Oh, it's like when I see my my band last year was amazing party, and you make a story, and that's communication. That's really good. Much always good.
Yeah, and then in terms of how often, if you really want to make an impact in France, how often should you play a show in each of those markets?
It depends on the city. Paris, 1 or 2 per year, and Paris it's really atypical, because you have, I think it's like in London, you have to rent a venue. You can't be paid because you play, or maybe 3-4 venues do this, but the others, it's like you rent the venue and you made your own ticketing and extra. So it's 1 or 2 per month, per year. That's enough. For each big city, the same. And after, you can go maybe not more than 4 per year. Or it's really because you know the guy, or you know that it's only for the pleasure. It's not only for communication. You have to expand your network. It's not really good to stay in the same place.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So we got started a little bit late, so I am gonna just open up for a little bit of questions from people. Just put your hand up and I'm gonna pass this mic to you if you have a question.
Hi, I'm Lisa, and you guys have all been doing a fantastic job, and thank you for this. I've written a ton of notes, so this is very, very helpful. I have a question, like you guys have talked about visas and booking fees and process of applying, but one question I have is about the promoters, like the concert promoters in Europe and Mexico and the US. Like in Canada, when you apply for festivals and we secure all our bookings, you apply directly to the festival. Like you fill out whatever form that they have online, or you go through your booking agent. In your areas, how do you find that person? Because when we've applied to international festivals, they always say, we don't book the talent directly. We have a artist agent, or talent buyer that does that, and then they don't give out that information, or you can't find it anywhere. So how do you find these talent buyers, or if you could just explain that for your country?
In France, it's about entourage. All the people you work with. More you have people you work with, more you win in credibility. So for the big festival like Vegas, if you're only alone, they know that it's not a work. It's just for playing. It's not. There is no real. They don't know, obviously, but it's not about strategy to put this group in this stage. I know there will be only 10, 20 people, but it's for the year after. Maybe they will work with another festival. It's always about strategy. If it's only for playing, that's for coffee concerts, or that's for the big festival. It's always about money. It's always about how many people you can bring in my stage, etc. So it's always like so they work with confident booking agency or label for for build the artist career.
Yeah, in the Netherlands, I guess we're music snobs because I have never seen an online application form other than for the Eurosonic Showcase, which unfortunately for you is for European artists only. But no, there's no online booking forums whatsoever. There's no talent buyers because all the festivals and venues have promoters on salary. So what you need is a local agent, someone who knows which stages you fit to, but mainly which promoters might personally really enjoy it and therefore do it even though you might be unknown. And then obviously the promoters that also sell the headliners to the festivals, or like the booking agents who also offer the headliners, have a little bit more weight when it comes to the smaller slots, because simply the promoters want to keep them happy to get a good deal on their headliner. So they might book a few of their smaller bands. And also really be careful about pitching too early, because there's so many bands who want to play such a tiny country that you won't get a second chance. So only pitch if you really feel like you'd be a good fit and argue why. And not just give it a go every year because it's not going to get you anyway.
I think in the UK there's a very strong line between the independent and corporate festivals. So the corporate festivals, you're only more likely to get the opportunity to play it if you're signed to a label or a booking agent that is facilitating those shows. The independent ones will have the window of opportunity to apply online, and those that don't, you will need to know who the booking agent is for those shows or for those festivals. And more often than not, the bigger festivals have more than one booking agent. So again, it falls back to your network and who you know in those countries. But also you can use things like LinkedIn. You know, sometimes the festival itself has another name that it trades under, as in a company registration name. So being able to find out what that is first might then help you locate who that booker is and then go on LinkedIn. But normally if you go on LinkedIn and just search for that festival, you might find in someone's credentials that they have booked for that festival or will be booking for that festival. Another good way to find out who that is reading some music industry press, whether it's the kind of like your Metal Hammers or Rock Sound or those sorts of magazines that will interview bookers for festivals. That way you've got a name and you can then find out who that is a lot easier. Or just asking people that you already know. You know, which bands do you know from Canada that have already played certain festivals? Who's been dealing with them over email? Can they do an introduction to you, or can they at least give you their name? So it is a little bit of like a treasure hunt trying to find out who these people are. But once you've sort of got through that first bit, it then opens up a lot more and becomes a lot easier to find these places. But it's also as well about timing. A lot of the festival applications are only open for about a 2-week window for, you know, get a chance to play on these festivals. They'll open up, say, 10 or 20 spaces out of sort of 200-300 bands. So there's not a huge amount of opportunity there. So knowing ahead of time when those applications are going to open and keeping that in your schedule to remind you could be the difference between getting a booking and not.
In Mexico, you don't have to apply except for the government or cultural festivals, and it's open. You can apply there. In Latin America, I don't know so much, but for example, you can be in some festivals just sending the email to the page. I know they're open to Colombia and Argentina. There are some cultural festivals that you can apply. I can send the information. For me, for a new band, it's a kind of tricky thing, the festivals, because sometimes it's good because you can be in the lineup and it can work. But then when you're going to perform, you will be performing maybe at 12 and there is nobody there. So I always suggest to be first to make their own shows and then try to fit in a festival, except that these culturals, or there are a lot of music markets, so you can apply there too.
In the US, there's a vast array of types of music festivals. You have the ones that are similar to the UK that are super corporate, like your Coachellas, that do work in tandem with record labels and talent buyers. But then the trick is to, or if you're looking to pitch, is to find the smaller ones that have conferences attached to them. Because, like, for example, in Atlanta, we have A3C Festival and conferences, and they do a mix of working with labels to book talent, but then they also have a small advisory board that makes suggestions, and they also allow for submissions. So starting there, and then also, like Jacques said earlier, attending a lot of the mid-range to smaller festivals in the US will kind of give you the pulse. You'll see the look and feel. And a lot of times, like especially with South by Southwest, it's a huge corporate festival, but there are a lot of one-offs going on. And you can literally pay $20 or actually just build with a promoter that you met randomly, or you hit them on Instagram, or just go to them an hour or 3 hours before the show is supposed to start, pitch your artist, and they'll let you get on that night. So attending the festival is definitely something that you should put into your strategy in terms of pitching your artists, to not only try to get them an on-the-fly show, but then to also catch what's going on in the culture of the festival, but then also target the festivals or the smaller festivals that have conferences attached to them, because 9 times out of 10 you can pitch and play.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So we're like over already, so I'm going to cut it a bit short. But if you do have any more questions for them, they'll be hanging around for a little bit, having some chips. And also there is the Manitoba Music Showcase tomorrow night. I see some of the artists in this room. Good for you. For those watching on video, you missed out on meeting these gems. But I really appreciate all of you coming out on a Monday night. This is exactly how you make your career move forward. And they're gonna recognize you tomorrow at the showcase, so be sure to come say hi. And with that, I just so you know, like, most of these people flew in yesterday and are extremely jet lagged. Some of them, English is not their first language, so not only are they jet lagged, but they're translating in their head right now. So, like, I'm absolutely floored and amazed by your expertise and your intelligence, and for making that long trek. This is going to be a long week for all of you, so I really, really appreciate you spending time with us here at Manitoba Music. So let's give it up for them.